White man cried when he saw who adopted the child he abandoned. What happens when a kind-hearted baker gives a bun to a homeless girl and ends up fighting for the daughter he never knew he had? The system tried to erase him, but what happened next flipped the entire script in a way no one expected. If anybody had the nerve to ask Jamal Connor why every single Friday, rain, wind, or subway funk, he dragged his aching back and flour-dusted hands down into the bowels of Grand Army Plaza Station, carrying a beat-up cardboard box filled with fresh pastries, he wouldn't offer no philosophical speech or deep monologue. He'd just give him that look. You know the one, that sideways smile that says, "You wouldn't get it, and I ain't about to waste breath trying." Then maybe, just maybe, he'd mutter, "Because I ain't you." And that'd be that. This was his ritual, not a performance, not charity, not some Instagram moment begging for likes. This was soul work, hard, physical, honest work. The kind that don't come with medals or headlines, just crusty knuckles, tired feet, and a spirit that refused to stay down while somebody out there went hungry. He wore a faded black bomber jacket that had seen more winters than some of the college kids who walked past him daily without eye contact. Tucked under his arm was the box. Still warm, the scent of vanilla, cinnamon, and butter escaping through the flaps like little whispers of comfort. Not a bakery smell. No, this was the scent of dignity, of memory, of somebody giving a damn. Grand Army was what you'd call authentically gritty, which is just a polite way of saying it was dirty, loud, and forgot how to care decades ago. The station buzzed with everything from saxophone solos to mental health breakdowns, and nobody looked twice at either. But Jamal, he moved through it like a priest on a mission, except instead of the Eucharist, he had raisin buns. Instead of sermons, he gave silence and presence, which in a world screaming for attention was revolutionary in itself. Beneath one of the concrete pillars, in the shadows that flickered like broken dreams, he spotted her, a woman, slim and wiry, the kind of tired you can't sleep off. Her face was unreadable, like a book with half its pages torn out. Next to her, curled under a fraying blanket that looked like it came from a discarded motel curtain, sat a little girl, maybe 7, maybe 8, skin the color of toasted pecans, hair in short puffs tied with unraveling blue yarn, and eyes, Lord, those eyes. Eyes that had already seen too much for any child's soul. Jamal squatted beside them, the box balanced between his knees. "Raisin," he said, voice calm like Sunday morning. "Still warm." The girl reached out, slow but sure, fingers thin like piano wires but steady. No flinching, no hesitation. Her mother, or whoever she was, nodded slightly. "Thank you," she said, flat as pavement. Not ungrateful, just empty. That kind of thank you people say when they're too tired to believe kindness is real. And then the little one tilted her head, squinted up at him with that old soul gaze and said, "You got soft eyes, like the daddy lion in my book." Jamal didn't speak, couldn't. That sound, the way she said daddy, it reached inside him and twisted something that had been numb for years. His chest didn't hurt exactly, but something sure clicked. A memory, a wish, a ghost. He opened his mouth to ask what book she meant. He never got the chance. "Hey, sir, step away from the child." The sound of authority without compassion sliced through the air like a whistle from a plantation overseer. Sirens, boots, blue uniforms, and that sudden heat that always rises when you're black and breathing in the wrong place at the wrong time. 2 cops, both white. One had that pink face like he'd never said "excuse me" in his life. The other looked younger, but that badge had already polished the empathy out of him. "What's in the box?" barked Pinkface. "Pastries," Jamal replied without flinching. "Excuse me?" "Pastries," he repeated louder. "For the unhoused, free. No games, no tricks, just bread and raisins." The officer yanked the box from his hands like it might explode. He pried it open, poking through with gloved fingers as if a croissant might leap up and confess to a felony. Meanwhile, his partner stepped behind Jamal and slapped a hand on his shoulder. "Turn around. Hands on your head." "For what?" Jamal asked, not defiant, just exhausted. "Suspicious activity. A report said a black male was interacting with a minor. We're following protocol." Ah, protocol, the magic word. The one-size-fits-all justification for whatever came next. The platform fell silent. A few passers-by slowed. One pulled out a phone. Another whispered to someone, "Here we go again." Most kept walking, because minding your business was a survival skill in this city. Jamal obeyed, hands on his head, body still. Not because he was guilty, but because he'd done this before. You move too fast, you don't get a do-over. I gave her a bun, he said calmly, and a smile. The woman stood up now, eyes lit with fury that no amount of fatigue could dim. He helped us, she said. You're harassing the only decent man we've seen in weeks. The cops ignored her. She didn't count. Homeless, black, female, not a single checkbox of credibility in their book. But the little girl stepped forward. She stood between Jamal and the cops, tiny frame straight as a candle. He smells like sugar and bread, she said. You smell like fear. Now that stopped everything. Even the younger cop blinked. The older one clenched his jaw. What's your relationship with the child? He barked. I don't know her, Jamal said. I feed people. I've been doing it every Friday for 5 years. Ask the station staff. You got any kids of your own? That one hit a nerve. No, Jamal answered, voice steady but low and sharp like broken glass. But if I did, I'd pray that if they were ever hungry in a train station, someone would hand them a bun, not a badge. The younger cop shifted his weight, like maybe his brain had started whispering doubts. But his partner snapped. Protocol is protocol. That's when she arrived. Supervisor R. Diaz, station manager, Latina, mid-40s, tough eyes, zero nonsense. I've reviewed the footage, she said. This man gave them food. That's it. Now take your hands off him. Right now. The silence that followed was thick and bitter. The older cop hesitated, but the crowd had gathered. Phones were recording. The tide was turning. He stepped back. And Jamal? He just looked at him, not with hate, worse, with disappointment. A man who once believed the system could be more than this, and now knew better. When you think you're defending the law, but really you're protecting your own fear, Jamal said, you ain't serving nobody. You're hiding. They left. One of them tossed the pastry box onto a bench like trash. Jamal picked it up. The buns were squashed, but not ruined. He turned to the woman. Hope you two find a place to sleep tonight. She nodded. We will. And you? He smiled. A smile that knew pain, but still chose hope. I'm gonna find justice. Just once. See how it feels. Sunday mornings had always meant something to Jamal Connor. Not church, not television, not silence, but ritual. The steady rhythm of life being stitched back together with heat, smell, and small comforts. That morning, he was in his kitchen, bathed in golden light that spilled through the blinds like molasses. A cast-iron skillet hissed with omelet edges, curling to crisp. Coffee bubbled its promise of alertness, and the faint voice of Sam Cooke floated through the airwaves like an ancestor's hum. For a brief moment, everything was where it should be. And then came the knock. Not the lazy three-tap rhythm of a neighbor borrowing sugar, not the upbeat buzz of delivery. No, this was a different kind of sound. Flat, firm, and weighted with intent. It echoed through the walls like a verdict. Jamal opened the door, not with curiosity, but with the instinctive caution that every black man past 30 in America learns, a quiet readiness, not for trouble, but for the possibility that peace had overstayed its welcome. Standing on the porch was a woman in a gray wool coat. No makeup, no smile, hair pulled back with bureaucratic precision, the kind of face you don't forget, not because it's beautiful, but because it holds absolutely nothing for you. No softness, no warmth, just business. In one hand, she held a folder fat with paper. On her chest, clipped with authority, Morgan Bentley, Brooklyn Child Services. Good morning, she said, crisp as cold toast. Mr. Jamal Connor? That depends who's asking, he replied, voice flat. I'm with Child Protective Services. We need to speak. It's urgent. He didn't move, but something inside him recoiled. Not out of fear. He had lived through worse. But when the government shows up at your door uninvited, they rarely come bearing good news or fresh pies. The Office of Child Services smelled like worn linoleum and unspoken regrets. The walls were painted in cheery pastels, but no amount of baby blue posters with smiling cartoon families could hide the stale sadness embedded in the place. The coffee in the waiting area machine claimed to be premium blend, but Jamal knew better. Nothing in here was premium. Not the chairs, not the promises, and certainly not the justice. Morgan sat across from him, her folder now open, papers laid out with surgical precision. This is regarding a young girl named Evelyn, or Evie. You encountered her recently at the Grand Army Station. Jamal leaned back, crossed his arms. I gave her a bun, he said. Didn't know that was a crime now. And I definitely wasn't out shopping for a child, if that's what this is. She didn't blink. She didn't smirk. No wasted expressions. That alone told Jamal, this woman was not here for performance. She was here for fact. She drew a picture yesterday, Morgan said. You're in it, holding her hand. She labeled you My real dad. Jamal exhaled slowly as if deflating a memory. That's sweet, he said cautiously. But kids also draw unicorns and space robots. Doesn't make it a binding legal statement. Morgan didn't argue. Instead, she slid a page forward. We found her file, she said. Specifically, the relinquishment documents. Her biological father signed away parental rights 6 years ago. Signature reads, J. Connor. Birth date matches yours. Jamal stared at the paper. No words came. You're telling me, he began. Morgan tapped her tablet. A few clicks later, a hospital logo appeared. You were in a coma, she said. Car accident. 3 months. You couldn't have signed anything. Jamal looked at her now. Really looked. Not at the papers. Not at the screen. At her, because she was the face of it. The machine that had erased him while he slept. So someone decided I was out of the picture, he said, voice low. Convenient. Silent. And legally helpless. Yes, she said. And now we're trying to trace who made that decision. The name on the submission line, Martha Graves, former caseworker. The name struck him like a brick in a snowstorm, cold but undeniable. He remembered her. Brown hair, too much perfume, always with a clipboard. She came to the hospital, asked questions, spoke to doctors, handled papers. She still work here? Jamal asked. She left 3 years ago, Morgan replied. But she gave a deposition, admitted the signature was falsified, and she named someone else, a man named Conrad Wesley. Jamal's brow furrowed. Who is that? Morgan hesitated, then answered. The man who adopted Evie. An hour later, Jamal found himself in a waiting room that looked more like a DMV crossed with a cemetery. Overhead lights buzzed with bureaucratic fatigue. The floor gleamed like hospital tiles, clean but unfriendly. In the corner, the premium blend coffee maker gurgled lies. Then the door opened. He stepped in. Conrad Wesley, white, clean-shaven, hair like a politician, suit sharp enough to cut tension, and eyes like steel behind glass. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't soft either. He looked like a man who made decisions without blinking. They sat across from each other, a table between them. Morgan stood off to the side, arms crossed. Mr. Wesley, she began, we have evidence suggesting that the adoption was processed illegally. Specifically, the consent form from the biological father was forged. Were you aware that Mr. Connor had not voluntarily given up his rights? I was told, Conrad said slowly, that the father abandoned her, that he was gone. Martha told us it was clean. My wife, we couldn't have children. Evie was our blessing. We gave her everything. School, healthcare, stability. You gave her a lie, Jamal said. Not loud, not angry, just solid. Did you know I was alive? Did you know I was recovering in a hospital bed, unable to speak? Conrad paused, then almost whispering, I didn't want to know. Then you don't get to call yourself her father, Jamal replied. You took a child to fill a hole in your life. That's not parenting. That's theft. Conrad looked away, but not long. She calls me dad, he said. I read her bedtime stories, held her through the flu. I was there when my wife passed. I braided her hair before ballet. I raised her. Then why? Jamal asked, leaning forward. Do you look like a man waiting for a sentence? Morgan cleared her throat. Mr. Connor, we can reopen this case immediately. Start the process for a legal custody review. But before we do, would you like to see her? Jamal's mouth was dry. He nodded. The room was quiet, not in a peaceful way, in the way a church gets quiet right before someone confesses something big. She was sitting at a small desk, crayons, paper, pink hoodie. She didn't see him right away. When she did, she tilted her head, not scared, curious. You're the bun man, she said. He smiled, a flicker of emotion breaking through. Yeah, he said. And maybe I'm something else too. She squinted at him, the way only kids do, trying to see not just who you are, but what you're made of. You brought food. Are you bringing truth now? I'm trying, he said. She nodded, serious. Then she picked up a crayon, drew a sun in the corner of a blank page. Can you be my son? She asked. And Jamal, Baker, survivor, man who had been erased and returned, looked at her and then at his own hands, calloused and real. If you'll let me, he whispered. Yeah, I will. The Brooklyn District Courthouse had that peculiar kind of ugliness that only government buildings knew how to perfect. Glass walls that reflected nothing, benches that promised no comfort, guards who looked through you like you were part of the decor. The smell was faintly metallic, like old air conditioners and overcooked tension. Every hallway buzzed like it wanted you gone, and Jamal Connor felt that buzzing in his bones. He wasn't new to buildings like this, but this time, he wasn't here as someone backing up a cousin or comforting a neighbor. This time, it was his name on the paperwork, his life on the table, his daughter, if the law still had room for that word. Jamal sat at the long metal table in a room too clean to trust. His palms rested upward, not in surrender, but in transparency. Let them see. Let them read the history in the lines of his hands. Across from him sat Morgan Bentley, composed as always, as if her backbone was made of rebar and her patience rationed. Next to her, the city-appointed attorney, a man with a half-tucked shirt and eyes that pleaded, "Please don't ask me anything complicated. I'm just here for the paycheck." And across from Jamal, perfectly polished and perfectly still, was Conrad Wesley. That suit was expensive, probably tailored, probably Italian. He looked like a man used to winning arguments without raising his voice, like he practiced speeches in mirrors and got used to applause he didn't earn. Between them, silence, thick, concrete, waiting. Morgan broke it. "We're here to discuss primary custody arrangements and determine the legal status of the child Evelyn. As we've discovered, the parental rights relinquishment was improperly processed." "Forged," Jamal said, not even lifting his eyes. "Not mishandled, not misfiled, forged. Call it what it is." Morgan paused, then nodded. "Forged," she repeated, "and therefore custody must be reevaluated." Conrad sat like the words didn't belong in his world, but they did. Oh, they did. "Allow me," he said suddenly. His voice was smooth, like someone who believed interruptions were an art form. "Evie knows me as her father. For 6 years I've raised her, fed her, protected her. I was unaware of any misconduct during the adoption process. I was told her biological father had abandoned her." Jamal looked up slowly. "You know," he said, voice steady, "I heard things too. Heard my eyes would never open again. Heard my muscles were done moving. Heard the state closed my file because I was medically inactive." He stood, not aggressively, but with finality. A man who was finished being erased. "Then I woke up," he said. "No child, no past. Just hospital bills and a signature on a page I never saw. Someone tore out a chapter of my life and handed it to a stranger." Wesley's lawyer leaned in to whisper, but Wesley waved him off. He had that look, not of confusion, but of someone who finally realized the other person brought the truth, and it stung. "I didn't steal her," he said. "I gave her a home when no one else wanted her." "You didn't love her," Jamal said, eyes burning through the air. "You loved what she did for your story. She filled your silence. And when I showed up, you wished I hadn't." Morgan tapped her pen, gentle but with weight. "Let's stay focused. Here are the facts. The child drew a picture identifying Mr. Connor as her father. She's expressed a desire to know him. Her memory includes fragments of his presence. We have audio testimony from the caseworker who falsified the documentation, and we have hospital records confirming Mr. Connor was incapacitated at the time of the alleged signature." Conrad tried to shift the tide. He reached into his folder and held up a photo. Evie in a pink tutu, one foot arched in a ballerina pose, smiling like the world hadn't broken her yet. "This is who I'm protecting," he said. Jamal reached into his own folder. No performance, just truth. He unfolded a scan, a birth record. In the upper corner, Evelyn Connor, hospital, date, time, mother's name, father, Jamal R. Connor. "She's not a symbol," he said. "She's not a project. She's my daughter. Not emotionally, not metaphorically, biologically, legally, humanly. Do you hear me now?" Then the door creaked open. A young man in a government-issued blazer entered, tablet in hand. He looked like he'd just run from a printer room. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, breath short. "We've just uncovered a document, an email from Martha Graves, the former caseworker. It reads, and I quote, 'Per Mr. Wesley's request, I am submitting the parental waiver. He insists. The father is comatose. No one will ever know. It's under control.'" You could hear a pin drop. Conrad shot up from his seat, red crawling across his neck. "That's not—" "I didn't—" "Sit down," Morgan said. Her voice cut the air clean in half. Nobody spoke. The room was a vacuum. Then, another knock, and in walked Evie. A social worker followed behind, hand gently on her shoulder. But the girl wasn't nervous. She scanned the room, her eyes full of that knowing softness only children possess. She saw Jamal and smiled. The world paused. "Hey," she said. "Hey, baby girl," Jamal replied. "I drew you," she said proudly. "I saw it," he smiled. "They say you're my dad. What do you think?" She stepped closer, unblinking, clear. "When you left, Mama said it wasn't your choice. She said you were sleeping, but that you still loved me. that your heart didn't stop, just your body. Is that true? Jamal knelt. His voice cracked. Barely. Yeah, that's true. I just slept too long. She reached forward and wrapped her arms around him. Not politely, not timidly, fiercely, as if making up for every year lost. Morgan didn't speak, but something glistened in her eyes. Wesley sat frozen. Whatever words he might have rehearsed vanished. Morgan cleared her throat. Mr. Wesley, she said, we have what we need. Based on the evidence and emotional testimony, custody will be transferred, effective immediately, to Mr. Connor, pending final review for permanent guardianship. Conrad's hands trembled as he rested them in his lap. He didn't protest. He didn't blink. The verdict wasn't shouted, but it was heard. Jamal stood, Evie's hand in his. Let's go home, he said. She tilted her head. There'll be buns, right? He laughed, a sound that had been waiting in his chest for 7 years. Always. The scent that curled through the bakery that morning wasn't just warm bread and vanilla. It was memory. It was forgiveness. It was something that hadn't existed in that space for years. The feeling of home. Jamal Connor stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, fingers deep in dough. The rhythmic press of his palms echoed like a steady heartbeat. The flour dusted across his forearms like war paint, the mark of a man who knew how to work, how to rise, and how to rebuild. By the window sat a small table that didn't used to be there. On top, a spiral notebook with worn edges, a scattered rainbow of colored pencils, and a ceramic cup with half-melted marshmallows floating in lukewarm cocoa. Across from it, a girl, no taller than the counter, no quieter than a hummingbird. Evie, her hair in soft braids, her brow furrowed in artistic concentration, tongue poking out slightly as she drew a giant sun with arms. Jamal glanced up at her and smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't announce itself. It just happens, slow and wide, like something sacred returned to the surface. Behind him, the oven timer buzzed. He swiveled, opened the door, and the heat kissed his face like summer on your skin after a storm. You know what I'm making for you today? He called, his voice cutting through the soft jazz playing on the radio. Something dangerous and sugary, she replied, eyes still fixed on her drawing. Tell me. Caramel buns, he said with pride. But don't tell your dentist. It's our secret mission. I'll put jelly beans on top, she shouted. Then it'll be the ultimate weapon. Laughter bounced off the walls like music. It was the kind of sound that reminded you life hadn't given up yet. Just then, the front door creaked open. The little brass bell jingled, and in stepped a mailman who looked like he'd walked out of a black and white movie. All stiff leather satchel, hat tilted just so, and a face molded into permanent bad news. Jamal wiped his hands and signed for the envelope without thinking. But when he turned it over, his breath caught. No return address, just his name, written in a handwriting too neat, too practiced. The kind of handwriting people hire tutors to learn. He opened it slowly. Inside was a ring, thick, masculine, the metal dulled by time but heavy in the palm. Inside the band, a delicate engraving, SW, Sarah Wesley. Tucked beneath it, a note. I didn't understand what I'd lost. I treated her like a glass figure, something delicate, something mine, but she wasn't glass. She was fire and history and belonging. I took her past and tried to bury it in my comfort. Forgive me. She was yours all along. She just lived with me while I pretended that was enough. Conrad, Jamal sat. He didn't mean to, but his knees folded like someone had clipped the strings. The ring lay in his hand like a stone that had waited too long to be returned. The sounds of the bakery faded. The world outside, the cars, the crosswalk beeps, the fluttering pigeons all fell into a hush. It was just him and that note. Him and the understanding that sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers. A week later, he stood in front of the school, one hand tucked into his back pocket, the other holding tightly onto Evie's smaller fingers. Her backpack was nearly bigger than she was, swinging side to side with each anxious step. A bow sat lopsided in her hair, her own doing, and her eyes darted to the doors ahead, then back to him. You sure I can do this? She asked. It wasn't just about school. That question held all the weight of a girl who had learned to ask for permission just to exist. He knelt down. First day I worked the bakery, I burned both hands, he said. Couldn't even open a fridge. But look at me now, kneading dough like a pro. She giggled. You'll be fine, he said. You're stronger than you think. She hugged him, tight and fast. No drama, no words, just warmth. And then she was gone, swallowed by the building and its glass doors. But Jamal stood there, rooted, not alone, just quiet, like someone who had finally laid a ghost to rest. That evening, Grand Army Plaza Station looked the same as it always did. Chipped walls, echoes of shouts and saxophones, the occasional scurry of a rat that clearly paid no rent. But something was different. Jamal stood in his usual spot, black jacket, apron slung over one arm, box of warm buns under the other. But he wasn't alone. Beside him, dressed in a coat 2 sizes too big and holding a tiny woven basket, was Evie, her assistant bun minister, as she now insisted on being called. Inside the basket, chocolate chip cookies, homemade, slightly lumpy, lovingly imperfect. She handed one to a passerby with a solemn nod. For strength, she said. A woman sitting against the wall, swaddled in layers of what used to be curtains and quilts, looked up and chuckled. "You really her daddy?" she asked Jamal. He smiled, wide, proud, defiant. "Absolutely," he said. "By heart, by history, by hustle. Every way that counts." 3 months later, the court finalized everything. Full custody, signed, stamped, official. Jamal held the pen a moment before writing his name. He didn't rush it. This wasn't paperwork. This was a declaration, not to the system, but to himself. When he handed it back, the clerk nodded. Just another case closed. But Jamal walked out of that room feeling like he'd just signed a treaty after a long, bloody war. As for Conrad Wesley, he vanished. Some said he sold the house, cut all ties, dropped out of the social registries. There were whispers he'd been spotted in Cincinnati, teaching history. Others swore he lived in a trailer near Austin, fixing up old books and making peace with old choices. Jamal didn't look for him, didn't need to, but one morning just after sunrise, he opened the bakery and found something on the stoop. A drawing, no envelope, no message, just the picture. A girl stood in the middle, holding the hands of 2 men. One wore an apron, the other a suit. Above them, a sun shone, not in the sky, but from between them. No signature, but Jamal knew. He placed the drawing on the wall behind the counter, next to the menu. Let everyone see, because some endings aren't tidy. Some don't fit into a box labeled good or bad. They carry pain, yes, but also grace. And if you wake up each day choosing love, you've already won. He turned on the radio. Sam Cooke's voice filled the room. "A change is gonna come." Jamal nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "It already did, brother," he whispered. "It already did.